Good morning. I'm currently making breakfast and just thinking about what I need next for this project. I need basically now what I need to do. I finished in the last video, which was that little learning challenge. I finished Python. I learned how to do the for loops and everything, and I spent some time looking at a Hopfield network. I thought about what do I need to do next and everything. So the next thing I'm going to do is just read about recurrent excitation. How does it work? So that I can figure out how to write it into my project. I have school loans coming in on the 23rd, and I need to pay for Cloud Code. Cloud Code is 200. I'm only gonna pay for it for like a month. I think I can get it done in a month. I got my last one done in a month, so I think I can do this one in a month with adequate information and everything. So I'm gonna read about recurrent excitation next. But first of all, I was looking back at old pictures of myself today. I've never felt so, I don't know. I have no time to spend on my appearance, bro. I don't even work. I used to work out like a few times a week. Okay. I used to always work out. Okay. I used to be on tretinoin because I had insurance and I had time to myself. I had clothes. I had time to make fits. Okay. Since I've been here, bro, it's not been cute. I don't have time for myself. Like, I feel like all my free time goes to this project, bro. I worked so hard. And before the project, it was just everything making money. I just got the first of all, when I first moved to London, I got the craziest glow down for like a second. And then now I'm like kind of like it's not as bad as it was. I would never show pictures at that time, bro. I looked so crazy. But I've got hormonal acne, bro. I don't have time to work out. I should start again. All these different things and I was just looking at pictures of myself when I was a baddie. Now, this is the bad part is I was actually horribly miserable and suffering with such intense mental illness in this time. So it's like sometimes you look back at pictures of you and you're like, "Oh, it was so pretty," but it's like I was incredibly unhappy. And now I'm happy and I like myself. I feel strong, my mental illness got better and all these different things. I feel smart, all this stuff, but I just want to take a moment to appreciate the baddie that I was. Once this project is over, I hope I will return to my baddie era. It's not even looks per se. It's the fact that in this video I'm about to show you, my hair was straightened, I had like a cute dress on, all this stuff. I used to always be pulling out fits. I'll show you. I'll pull out a fit that I wore. I used to be cute. I used to wear makeup every day. I don't even wear makeup like ever. I actually went to like a hair salon. Like back then, I went to like an actual salon and they dyed my hair and like all this stuff. That was a rare thing. Like I didn't go that much, but my last year I was like, I'm done. I used to box dye my hair and it would be like a bit too dark. So I went to a hair salon and they did it so good. But I haven't gone to a hair salon and I went one time, like literally last year. Since then, it's just been me. Let's grieve together. This was me at my senior dinner. No, it wasn't senior dinner. It was my like what was it? It was like this boat party thing that they have for the seniors at the end of the year, bro. It's so good. Bro, my hair used to be long. My body used to be tea. Like now it's not. I'll return, bro. It takes effort. This is a thing. I've reflected on this so much this year. I was like, being a freaking woman, bro, it takes so much effort. And it's like when you're putting extra work into your life, dude, it's like if you can't have it all. And I'm hoping that after this, it won't take as much effort, but it's taken so much effort. I'm exhausted all the time to like just pull myself up. I had to pull myself up because I got here. I was broke. I was all of this stuff. Oh, I used to be a baddie, but I wasn't a scientist. So, like, I'm sorry.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Yeah, I used to try, bro. I used to pull fits out. If you see me in London, no, you didn't, because I look so frumpy all the time. The fits are not fitting ever. Look, I used to be cute. I used to wear makeup. I used to wear earrings, bro. I used to have cute little curtain bangs. And now it's like, anyways, so that's our motivation for finishing this project today. At this point, I will legit do anything. I'm so tired of this project. I'm so tired of this project, bro. It is stressful. It has had me stress eating, like, there's no I wanna spend time on myself again. I wanna start working out. I wanna get fit again. I just am tired, and, it's like an energy vampire at this point. Not really, because, again, I was those pictures, I cannot stress enough how mentally ill I was and depressed and, like, everything, and I hated myself, and I didn't know what to do with myself, and now I love myself, and I feel happy with myself, and I feel independent, and I feel good, and all this stuff that's, like, it was worth some time, like, not doing that to work on other stuff, but I'm really truly ready to, like, pour into myself again because my life right now is, like, work, sleep. Pouring into myself recently has been, like, sleep and mental health. Like, that's it. That's why I'm happy now because, like, I worked on my mental health, like, a lot, and I worked on my career a lot, and I like myself. You see, like, not just because 'cause you're focused on your looks 24/7 doesn't mean you'll be happy, but I do kinda miss being a baddie a little bit because right now I'm like a fratty. I'm a frumpy baddie, bro. It's funny, I actually reflected on beauty a lot this year, like, I'll put little videos up here from earlier in the year, and I think just taking some time to not have any focus on that at all was really good for me in a lot of ways, and I took a it was a chance to step back and actually think about my own relationship to beauty, my relationship to my womanhood, and how a lot of times I think that was, like, number 1 priority over a lot of other things and etcetera. So it was like I had, like, a break. I think recently I've been getting more in, like, a better energy, but shortly, like, I only started my YouTube video after already started to look a little bit better, but I was looking pretty frumpy for a while there because I was volunteering at a hostel. I was working all the time. There was weeks I was working 50, 60 hours a week. Like, I was working a lot. So I didn't look how I wanted to. And yeah, so I reflected a lot on beauty this year. And not only the whole thing about, sometimes there's other things in life that are important as well, like that, like our careers that we throw off to the side in as women, because we're taught to value people finding us attractive over everything. But I also feel like I healed my relationship to myself a lot. Growing up, I thought that I was very, very like, I didn't like how I looked at all. Um, classic teenager stuff. I thought I was like, I didn't like my body. Like, I had body image issues. I didn't have like makeup fits, nothing. Like, I was like very, I don't know, I was just very insecure in high school, especially. And when I got to college, I think only by the end of first year that I actually started wearing makeup. I dyed my hair for the first time at the end of my freshman year when I got home and it was COVID and everyone was doing stuff. And I think at that point, I was also struggling mentally a lot. And through that, I learned about self-love journeys. I need to go on a self-love journey. That's when I started to exercise and to do all this stuff to actually do self-talk to make myself feel confident. I think that was the first time I felt confident in my life was I started to have a self-love journey and all that. And I learned to speak to myself better and to hold like protect act as if you're confident, stuff like that that I just had never done growing up. But I put a lot of value in college into people liking me and finding me attractive. That was like really important to me back then, I would say. As smart as I was, and I cared about school, but I don't think I cared about it. I think my thing I cared about was surviving because I was very unwell. But I also like I had a crush. I wanted them to like me like a lot, honestly. And like I would get really down on myself that like they didn't like me. And just a lot of different things like that. I was like, do people find me attractive was like a really important question on my mind and stuff. And yeah, it's been really good to find a sense of myself that I like that isn't just my looks. Like, I like that I'm a good scientist. I like that I'm smart. I like that I like to read. I like that I'm a hard worker and that I'm dedicated and I'm consistent. Because I think that I actually didn't like myself still, even though I liked how I looked. Like, I didn't like me at all that much. I didn't know how to characterize myself, and then I didn't like the qualities that I had, like that I possessed. I didn't really know who I was at all. So I think it's just been really nice to find a different sense of self throughout this whole thing. And actually, I haven't really liked how I've been looking recently because I just haven't been feeling like don't, I don't know, like I need to like get new clothes and all that. And I just feel like my body changed a little bit throughout this project. And it's kind of different for me and stuff. So it's been interesting, but at the same time, I noticed that recently, I used to always, when people would show me pictures of me, I hated them. I thought I looked horrible in every single picture. It was like, it gave me genuine mental pain to look at pictures of myself. I did not like them at all. In high school, in college, if I took the picture of myself, I liked it. If somebody else took it, I thought I looked horrible and disgusting, and like I just didn't. I would actually like avoid looking at pictures of myself. And recently, I've been finding that even though I haven't been feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm taking a million selfies and posting stuff on Instagram, like at all, like I genuinely even haven't been on Instagram in like 2.5 years. Actually, yesterday I went to see a friend who is she's super cool. She's this older woman that I met in a hostel like 4 years ago when I first came to London, and she's genuinely one of the coolest people ever. And every time she's like in my city, we meet and we just talk and like have like yesterday we got Chinese food and we had a drink and we just talked about life, and she's really cool. But anyways, she took a picture with me and she took one just of me eating, and then she took one of the two of us later. And I was dreading looking at it. I was like, "Oh my god, I never look good in pictures." Like, I was kind of nervous, but actually when she sent it to me, I was like, "Oh, I actually don't look that bad." And what I've been finding recently is that I look back at pictures of myself or videos of myself from when I thought I didn't look good, and I have like a kinder lens, I think, and just like I have my expectations of myself aren't as high, and I actually look at myself and I'm like, oh, I actually like how I looked, or like I didn't look that bad. Where I used to look at myself and just feel this intense like or like hatred and anxiety and stuff. Where it's like I think actually taking some time to focus on myself as like a full person and not just how do I look uh actually made me like myself more in terms of like I look at myself, I'm like, oh, I actually look pretty. Like I don't look that bad. Where I'm like before I'd be like, do I look like a Victoria's Secret supermodel? Yes or no. It's like if it's a no, then it's like I look hideous. Whereas like now I'm like I look cute. Like I just look like me. I look fine. And that made me feel more photogenic. Like I think I used to think I was like the most unphotogenic person ever. And I think it actually took stepping back and being like, oh, I actually like a picture of me is just somebody loving me and wanting to have a memory of me and like, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, I'm happy. I think I look like me myself. I don't think that, you know what I mean? Like I think it actually was like a good healthy thing to take a break from how I looked, even though sometimes I feel a little bit frumpy. But I'll get back to that after. But I think with a healthier attitude and just with a better sense of myself. Yeah, I just think it's been a real healing journey the last few years, and just maturing and stepping back from like, when you're young, you're so attached to the male gaze and everything, and just like I want men to think I'm cute and like all this stuff. And or even not even just men. I want girls to think I look pretty, not even a sexual way, but like I want to look, you know what I mean? Like just stuff like that where it's like when you're younger, it's like it's super duper important to you. And like I think as I've gotten older, I definitely miss how I looked a lot sometimes, but I'm like I like myself, and that's been a really, really nice shift. So I don't think it's been a bad thing to focus on science and hard work and where does my career go and all that stuff for like a while. I've been writing down everything. Like right now my big goals are one, explore recurrent excitation more so I know how to put that in my computational model. Two, oh, well, I'll show you. So I was going back through, I wanted to find a paper before I asked ChatGPT to explain recurrent excitation a bit better for me. Because I don't know if I included this in the last video. I might not. But I had come up with like, I have so many tabs open right now. Basically, I had sort of, I thought that I had understood well enough. Like, okay, the hot field networks, I was like, okay, all you need to do is like do this and this and that, I think. And I asked ChatGPT if that was accurate. And it told me it was like, it's a good intuition, but it's like you could do it better doing it like this and this and that because I misunderstood something a little bit. So so I was looking at a hot field network and I was like, okay, I think it's like this part here with the iterations, but it told me that the better place to actually change would be the weights. So I was understanding like a little bit off. But that made me think that maybe I needed to actually do some understanding on what recurrent excitation was. So that's why I went back, and I've been looking back to this paper, which is super like it's a massive like 116-page paper, but it's super good. I actually this was one of the first papers that I read for my entire project. So it's just like a very, very large sort of overview of everything sharp wave ripples, and it has a lot of information in it. So it's a good paper. But the other thing that I have been kind of getting from this is I have also been doing some thinking about my conclusions, and I need to actually transfer this because I made a voice memo because I've been thinking about all the different things to talk about. I want to talk about this is like not well written. This was just me like bursting it out. Basically, was just all the different things that all the other dissociation related things that could be explored based on this concept, this idea. So non-pathological forms of dissociation, maybe they're high arousal, but not uh but they can just consolidate fine. We have maybe medium arousal is a more embodied self state. I'm gonna just briefly mention that. This doesn't matter. I'm just telling you. But non-pathological forms of dissociation, I briefly mentioned possession trance research as well because these were all things that were controversial within dissociation that I thought I'd mention how they could be improved with this addition. And then also dissociative absorption, I think could be maybe there's some innate differences in areas like the locus coeruleus and the cholinergic system in people with dissociative absorption. And that maybe if you actually, because, okay, so dissociative absorption is like a trait that people have where they are more likely to get really immersed into something without, like, and then feel as almost as if their self is gone. Like, oh, I listen to music and like I feel like I get completely lost in the music. And what's interesting is that basically if you have that trait, it's not inherently a bad thing. Like it's just a way that people process the world. But the thing about it is that if you have it, it's you're like it's very like correlated with the developing different psychopathologies or correlated with psychopathologies. I need to find the paper again, but for example, people with OCD are also likely to have higher amounts of dissociative absorption. And I thought that maybe that would come down to how differences in how people process arousal that might make them more susceptible um to this kind of psychopathology. So for example, differences in like the cholinergic system and everything. So people are just genetically more likely to develop or more arousal. Maybe their cholinergic system has like, I don't know, a different like I actually thought this was really interesting. I read a paper that showed that people I'm gonna try to find it again right now. I don't fully remember what I was looking this up because I thought I was thinking about how my ADHD, I feel like it made it harder because I want to be like in states of arousal more. Like I want to be like really immersed in stuff and I want to be like overactive all the time. But my body, like I feel like it's like it was very overstimulated. And I feel like my I was like my ADHD and my chronic stress are like enemies within the same body. So then I went to look up neurodivergence and I found something pretty interesting. Let me see if I can find it again. I want to find the autism one, but basically they have found that so impaired cholinergic neurotransmission has been suggested to play a role in the cognitive deficits in ADHD. So I guess differences in how they actually navigate like their cholinergic system works. The cholinergic system seems to be very important for a lot of things. People with dementia or Alzheimer's, they actually have too little acetylcholine, like they have too little, yeah. And then I know there was also a connection with schizophrenia, but I'm trying to find. Okay, so basically cholinergic neuromodulation is also altered in autism spectrum disorder. So cholinergic neurons in the NBM have been shown to be altered in size, number, and structure, and decreased levels of the ACH precursor Okay, I wish I could find the exact thing. I'll put it up here. Like I made a little post, so it's good because I can go back and remind myself. Oh, this was the one actually. So basically, when they gave people with autism more acetylcholine, it basically made them less cognitively rigid and had less social deficiency in a mouse model of autism, which is really cool. And I was reading somewhere, I don't know which one it is, but in one of these different disorders, they actually had less of a capacity for like processing acetylcholine. And I was thinking, and maybe it's not in the hippocampus, like who knows, but I was thinking about how that would make so much sense that autism and disorders like PTSD and stuff are super comorbid. And I was like, it makes sense that like if you can't if too much acetylcholine is like, I can't remember what it was I said. I'll try to put it up here, but I was like, if you process it different, it's probably also impacting what happens when it's, I don't know, when it's like there's too much of it or something, or when it's in a psychopathology context. So because I think what I was reading is that autism makes it so that you don't produce, or like you have less of a capacity for producing acetylcholine or something like that. I'll try to find the actual fact and put it up. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'll put it when I'm editing. So anyways, that's why I was thinking that maybe people who have this dissociative absorption trait, they might, like, for example, they might just innately genetically have a tendency to get into these really intense arousal states, but it doesn't necessarily become pathological until until it does, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't extinguish this fear, I'm developing PTSD and like stuff like that. And so that's what I was thinking about as well. So I'm going to talk about all that, but I want to include a section in my discussion where I'm talking about like why does it persist over time? Because obviously, like, the problem with dissociative amnesia is that for like an extended period of time you can't remember things. And I wanted to talk about all the reasons why I think that your brain would like trap the memory. So for example, I want to talk about reconsolidation and how maybe that like these memories, when they come back up, like the memory needs to reconsolidate as well. Like if it can't consolidate at all, that sucks. But then if every time, like let's say you've consolidated a bit, but then when it's coming back up, it's still creating arousal. I'm gonna go into how I think this happens, but I was like, that would mean that a really specific memory just can't, it continues to not be able to consolidate thoroughly and properly over a period of time. So even if you can consolidate like a fragment, it's like the arousal is too high every single time. I don't want to go out into it because it's like it's almost like I'm spoiling my paper because I have a lot of different things to say. But the other one is that I was going to talk about a lot of the different theories that I discussed throughout the course of these videos that I didn't get, that are not going to be included in my actual experiment. And one of these is that there's like, I was like, maybe the in people with PTSD, this noradrenaline basically is up, and I was saying maybe that's innervating the medial septum just a little bit, making it more sensitive to encoding and producing theta waves. And the reason I thought that was because of different experiments on salience and how basically after trauma, for a period of, after an acute arousal period, people for a second are like they're more sensitive to any kind of new experience, any kind of salience, good or bad. So anything makes them more like alert, not just bad things, but even good things. Compared to people who didn't have an acute stress, they don't have that. So I thought that your system is just more sensitive to salience, which is why the cholinergic system is maybe up. And I was actually reading this paper right now, and they were actually going into the medial septum a bit. So that made me think like maybe like what I was reading in my nerd era, I feel like sometimes I'll hear myself speak. I'm like, I sound like a nerd right now. But anyways, like it's really like I'm really obsessed with this. It's so much fun. But okay, so sharpwave ripples persist after lesions of the medial septum that abolishes. So okay, this is a thing, is that usually these medial septum lesions would make it so that theta oscillations can't happen at all. These are all things that I could like kind of mention or whatever. I need to make sure this is all accurate still, but the sharpwave ripples still happen, but that still makes sense within the scope of my theory. Like that doesn't make it not right. I don't know. I just think there's it.
they're already going into medial septum here. I think it's like that was my sign that I should definitely talk about that and talk about how I feel like that could be like one of the reasons that dissociative amnesia persists over time is that you are more sensitive to salience until the arousal is diminished or until the trauma is processed or whatever. I don't know. I'm gonna just talk about that. And it's kind of cool that they were already talking about the medial septum through here. That made me think that maybe there really is like a relationship. Actually, I want to talk about that embodied self thing like a little bit. So I had this thought the other day that I think I'm gonna mention. My whole thinking is that like if you're in a state of arousal because acetylcholine is high, and if that's the thing causing dissociation, this is the thing is that when acetylcholine is high, it you you have less access to stored patterns in your body. Okay, so you have less access to like your memories and things. You're you experience the things that you're experiencing as very singular and like very detached. I don't know how to put it. It's like very separated. So it's like a very, very unique experience. And your brain wants to do that. Because it wants to make sure like you really get that. I don't know if this is making sense, but it's like it doesn't want you to be mixing it up with everything else in your brain like too much. It wants you to make sure that you know this is a very, very singular experience and encode it in like this is like a unique episode of life, right? So when acetylcholine is going up, it's making that it's facilitating that feeling of like, okay, focus on this. Don't don't be like interconnecting with it with a bunch of other stuff in your brain and stuff. Like this is just like a very special and specific thing. And when it's all the way low, you're not even really thinking about the outside world. You're just consolidating stuff. Like you're just kind of like for example, one time that you are consolidating your experiences would be during non-REM sleep. So, you're kind of just like laying around or when you're just being completely quiet and, not really doing anything. I actually also wonder if meditation is probably like a really, really intense consolidation window where you're just consolidating experiences, like you're not getting like aroused by anything. Okay. Or that's the point, right? So this is what my thinking was. There are times when the acetylcholine, like it's like medium. And so you're still getting interconnected with patterns, stored patterns, but they're not you're still making associations with what you're looking at, but you're not just consolidating. Like you're there and you have access to all those stored patterns as you make the memory or more access to them. Like you can spontaneously kind of like replay things, recall things, whatever. So I was kind of saying that a medium arousal state may be experienced as a more embodied self state in which individuals can both process new experiences and also relate them to patterns within their own internal framework. Again, this is my choppy writing right now, but this also calls in like evokes, I guess, the question of the self as a network of pattern of internal resources that is not always particularly useful during states of high arousal or consolidation windows. And what I was mentioning here is that there's a question of whether non-pathological forms of dissociation are dissociation. And what I was saying, so high arousal creates experiences that feel unique and singular and which are not interrelated with other memories in the wider system of self. And I was saying that this could facilitate the brief sense of being outside of one's own self or the self not existing as the brain moves resources away from pattern completion and moves towards encoding that is intensely separated. So, one example is a flow state in which athletes are so immersed in their game that it feels as if they disappear and they're at one with the game. So, I was saying that the higher the arousal, the more it's like that pattern completion stops. And because of that, you stop feeling like you're inside yourself because you're not connecting to your wider framework of self. Whereas when you're in that medium state, you're like, okay, this is things that I experience, and you have this kind of embodiment situation where you're like, this interrelates with a lot of other experiences that I had in my life. So I was saying the self is like kind of like it's not always useful. It's like a feeling that you are completing patterns is like my thing. Like it's like, oh, I existed in like all these different times and all these different places, and like I can sort of complete these patterns, and like, oh, there's things inside of me that I experienced before, versus without that it just goes away because you don't really need it, and it's not useful. And I was actually, this is one, my undergraduate thesis was on possession trance rituals. And one of the coolest papers I read, that I'm going to show you a picture. I was fascinated with it back then. And I thought it was so cool. And I even painted a little picture of it. This is what I painted back then. And then I'm going to show you the idea. It's something called body worlding. It's from a book by a philosopher called Aaron Manning. I think it's like one of the coolest things I ever read. I'm going to try to find it. It's from this book. It's called Always More Than One: Individuation's Dance. And the chapter that I read for my thesis was Toward a Leaky Sense of Self. It's the first chapter. This was actually suggested by one of my professors back then for me to read this. Okay, so this is the essay. It's called Toward a Leaky Sense of Self. Took me forever to get to this, but so she talks about the idea that in psychoanalytic theory, there's this idea that, okay, so the infant's relation to the world is mediated by the skin's capacity to serve as a container for experience. And so basically she talks about how good development within this theory is to feel a sense of being contained within one's own skin. That's kind of the theory. And if the caregiver is meaningfully present, then the infant's mind will likely be experienced as integrated, as bound and held together. While if the caretaker is meaningfully absent, then the infant's mind will likely be experienced as unintegrated, as broken and falling to pieces. And she was talking about how skin is like an important barrier for containment. But then she talks about this idea about, I'm going to try to explain it. It's been a while since I've read this, but she was talking about the skin as like about the world as relation as a kind of third space in the world. And she talks about body worlding, which is this concept. So the assemblage is a sensing body and movement, a body world that is always tending and attending to the world. And the whole idea, which is why it's called Toward a Leaky Sense of Self, is that there's, rather than being like one container of skin, that our sense of self kind of it's like porous, and there's times that it's very contained, and then there's times that it kind of dissipates, and that you like the world and the body are in movement together. And there, if I'm remembering it right, it's like there's times in which your sense of self gives way to relation, and relation is kind of also this third space in which you kind of, I can't get any more of the chapter, but you kind of, you and the world are in movement together, and there's not really just like the world and you, but that both of you are in movement at the same time, and that your sense of self can kind of dissipate and kind of interrelate with the world and kind of move with the world and change with the world. That's not the best explanation. I haven't read this, like I said, in like quite a few years, but I always thought that idea was really interesting. And it kind of reminded me of that, where there's a sort of medium space where you can interconnect with the sort of your internal framework. And that I would imagine that gives you a sense of containment because you see yourself as sort of interrelated with sort of the past and with experiences that you had before. But as you sort of get into these higher arousal states, like your sense of self like is not, you kind of lose access. It becomes less pertinent that you interconnect with your stored patterns because you want to see that experience as unique, and your brain doesn't want to mix up the outside world with you, or it doesn't want to mix that memory up with other memories inside of you. Like it wants to say like this is this. And so I thought that would mean that maybe like a medium arousal state, like let's say like if you can get acetylcholine from 0 making sharp wave ripples to like 100, like you're super aroused, like 50%, you're like, okay, I'm experiencing a state of self of like medium arousal. But then once you get into like the higher amounts, you're like, oh my God, like it doesn't even matter that I exist. Like I am just experiencing the world like 100% without any interconnection to my internal framework. And then you consolidate it later. And then maybe later within yourself, it kind of interconnects with other, then you maybe contextualize the memory differently as you process it and consolidate it. But for that period of time, like your sense of self is just like gone, like nothing. Yeah, that's my idea that I had recently. And I'm going to try to talk about that a little bit too. Not too much, but like a bit. All right. Hello again. I had the best day ever. Not really. Actually was, oh my God, I was so distraught this morning. I had to go to my side job. I genuinely started crying at work. I don't know if my period is starting, but literally my like multiple people were asking me like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." But I was like, "I hate this job so bad." I was like, "Do not make me come back to this job." I was making beds. I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was making beds. This is my side job at a hostel. I was finishing the last bed. Someone came in and said, "Hey, like the other day I asked someone to make my bed for me and nobody made it. Can you make it?" I was like, I guess I'll go all the way back downstairs, get the sheets. Came up to make the bed, and in the middle, like no, before I even started, another customer comes in and asks me, "Hey, can you make my bed?" I was like, "Okay, I can give you the sheets." He said, "No, can you make it because I have a back issue?" I started crying, not in front of him, but I was just like, I can't take it anymore. Anyways, but then I left and had the best day ever, and I walked around this cute little market. It was crazy. It was so packed. I went to my favorite area in London, but I'll keep it a secret. It's like my favorite spot, and I go there all the time. And I was over there, and there was like a little market happening, but it was crazy. All the dessert, like I kept seeing dessert stands, and I'm like, oh, there's no way I'll be able to eat that, and it would be gluten free. And I go to a new place because I have gluten makes my stomach hurt so bad. Like, and I even at the end, I just wanted a water bottle, and I went to get water at like a pancake stand, and it was like I was like, "There's no way I'd be able to eat that." And then I looked down and it was gluten-free too. Everything it was crazy. It wasn't like a gluten-free festival. It was just like it was just a good day for me. It's like maybe I need to come back on Sundays, but anyway, so I'm eating this delicious meal that I had earlier for a second time. I was reflecting a lot on mental health today. I've been already working on more stuff for this project, but I'm not going to show it yet. I want to do more and then show it in a little while because part of the reason I was having a mental breakdown at work today, I was so mad and sad. That's why I think my period's starting. But I was like, God, just get this paper done for me. I can't do it anymore. It's required such intense focus and determination and just like it just required a lot from me. It's been a really, really big thing. And it's just been tiring. And it's just the feeling of like I've been working on this for a year now and it's just like me like pouring my soul into this and I just really want it to be done. But I was reflecting today on my journey with mental health actually because I've been doing a lot of internal healing in my own life and thinking about mental health throughout this whole project and my experience. It's been such a process of taking control over my experience and having a voice in it because I reflected a lot this year on how having a mental illness is so difficult because it changes the it kind of changes your power dynamic or it changes the power dynamic that other people have over you even within mental health and like within the mental health field and it just puts you in this sort of lower power position. I would say it's a very difficult experience and it can be really like humiliating, frustrating, painful and all this stuff. And then I was thinking a lot about my own journey today and all the things that I struggled with that I never spoke to about to anybody. Like not even I would just talk about it like just barely with my therapist, but I was very nervous to talk to her about what was happening with me, even though she was trauma informed and all this. And it can be really hard. And I never talked to anybody about it. And I felt so much shame about it for like a very long time. And kind of I was just like I really want to I feel like partly this YouTube little series I've been making um that like it's just kind of been to capture this moment in my life and this first big paper that I've written that has been just a reflection of something so personal because I don't think like my future research that I do will ever be so personal again in such a personal journey. And, who knows who will see these, if anybody ever will. But I just thought, like, obviously, like, I'm on my own journey in my career, and I thought it'd be special to capture it. But this has kind of just been what I've been like processing. And, I really have a dream one day of being good representation for people, of somebody who struggled with a mental illness, because something that I found almost implied in some of the papers that I read that were dismissive of the condition that I was facing. It just feels like there's this underlying implication sometimes, and maybe this is just how it feels reading it as somebody with a mental health struggle. That I don't always think that researchers, I think sometimes like this is the problem is that there's so many great clinicians, mental health, people, researchers, whatever. But I do think that when you work with something for a very long time and you don't have lived experience, there can be a time where you kind of I think there can be like the danger of dehumanizing the subjects that you're working with. I think mental people with mental illness have not really had a voice all the time within research and within etc. Like they've sort of been subjects to people who are like professionals in their experience, who are sort of creating these analyses of their experience. And sort of, I think at times is the problem is that they kind of overwrite the experience of people with mental health. And I found that to be the case myself as somebody who struggled with dissociative symptoms. And I think sometimes I don't think that people always interact with people who struggled with a really intense mental health struggle and see them as like, oh, like intelligent, normal human beings like you and me. Like, I think that a lot of times, like, I don't think that I'm necessarily the image that people have in their heads of somebody who struggled with a severe like mental illness at all. That's somebody who like, self-aware and has a good grasp over their mind and smart and all this stuff. I think a lot of times we have this image in our heads, and I have to get rid of this myself sometimes too, of people with mental health who struggle with more serious mental health issues as being like clueless and distressed and sort of like, all these different things, and it's just not the case. And I think that really stops people from acknowledging their own mental health struggles sometimes, because they're like, well, that's not, you don't want to identify with that. And it also keeps people from talking about their mental health struggles. Like I said, I didn't want to talk about a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of complex reasons for that. I'm going to talk about something that I hate. I didn't bring this up really to anybody at the time because I was aware enough to know that like this is not how my brain should be functioning, and that people might see me differently. And this is the problem. I think this was such a complex experience. Particularly, this was my problem, is that I think that when I was younger, when I was really struggling with the most intense part of my dissociative symptoms, I didn't want to tell people what was going on because one of the big things that actually stopped me from saying this to my therapist is because this is the things I went after this research, dissociative amnesia research, because there was not enough information on my experience, and a lot of people believed it was fake. And one of the things that really hurts and really irks me about that is that survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault and sexual everything are always being told, like, are always being kind of gaslit into thinking that their experience is fake in the first place. So it felt it was almost like institutionalized survivor shaming within dissociation science, and I was really irritated. I mean, that was scary for me before I went into this project and really reclaimed that power dynamic over this project and over that science. I was like, I gotta do it myself. Like, I believe me, everything, right? Before I did that, it was hard because I was really afraid to talk about my mental health symptoms that actually are very normal for what I went through. But I was worried that I was going to go into a mental health circumstance and talk about my mental health symptoms, and somebody was going to say, that your trauma is not actually real. You're just, I don't know, hallucinating it. Maybe this is, I was really worried that I was psychotic. Okay. And I had a lot of this is the thing. I had a lot of mental health struggles that overlapped with psychosis, and I never actually, and this was post trauma. I'd never struggled with it before. It was post trauma. And this is the complex part. And this is like my interest as a scientist now, is that there's also a lot of complexities there and how dissociation works. And I'll get into it in a second, but I didn't want to talk to my therapist because I was really nervous that people would say, like, your trauma is not real, you're just hallucinating it, and like, stuff like that, it made me really scared to talk about my trauma symptoms. All this was happening because I was in such an intense headspace post trauma, and I've healed a lot. The place that I am now is so drastically different from where I was like right after trauma. But I think the fear of being invalidated as a survivor is so hard. But actually, trauma symptoms are so much more complex than we give them credit for. And trauma is not just like flashbacks and nightmares. There's so much more to trauma. Trauma can make you psychotic. Trauma can make you like, I've had tics the last 2 years, really. It didn't really start until like 3 years ago. I get like this eye tic thing that I didn't really have like ever, that I've been like working on. I don't know. I just like I had a lot of mental distortions after trauma, and that's part of trauma. And I think people don't really talk about that enough, and the possibility of all those different things happening to you after trauma. I don't think a lot of people have seen like very complex sort of manifestations of trauma and more intense manifestations of what PTSD can look like. And PTSD is very, very complicated. It's not just, I mean, trauma is complicated. It's not just getting triggered. Like it can really mess your brain up a lot. And for the first like year or two or three, honestly, after I went through different levels of understanding what was happening to me, doesn't mean it went away. But I will say like the first about like after I recovered memories, maybe like within 6 months or so, maybe even less than that, like within that amount of time, I started getting this thing in my head where it was like I was getting intrusive thoughts all the time. I had intrusive thoughts all the time of like people saying things like not even bad things, just sometimes normal things. Sometimes it was just words and stuff, and like feelings, and I didn't know what to make of that at all. I was stressed out all the time and frozen all the time. So I was struggling with trauma in other ways. And I thought like, to me, and this coincided with me becoming a spiritual person as well. And I still am a spiritual person. I just have a healthier relationship to it now. But I thought I was very like intuitive, or like I could really understand people. Like I could understand people's minds or something. Like because I just had these intrusive thoughts all the time, and I looped them in. This was the whole journey to me coming here to the science that I'm doing now, okay? So this was everything that I was observing, like kind of this is like a part of the journey up to the research that I'm doing now. But I was like, I thought like the intrusive thoughts that I was getting, I didn't understand how to contextualize them, I think. And I just thought that I was like, it was like I was living in other people's heads all the time. That's how I felt, okay? It wasn't like I had other identities or anything like that. I would say probably if I had really been open about it and talking to someone who maybe was really understood dissociative disorders, maybe they'd say I had like dissociative disorder not otherwise specified or something. Like I didn't feel like I had other selves, but I almost felt like I was living in people's heads all the time and living in these thoughts and these, like that's how it felt. And I didn't feel like, I feel like it was a way for me to make sense of like the jumbledness and the fragmentedness. And here was the creepy part, was that so time went on. Okay, I was in that headspace for about like a year. And then after that, I had like I started to understand what it was about a summer after, like the summer after it started. I had a moment of awareness with it because I had a thought. This is the thing, is that after a while, like they became like very, a lot of the times, like they could be very sexual or very angry, okay? And they were like these just phrases that would just come up into my head. And I had a moment of clarity when the thought came into my head that was like, it was like a very sexual or very angry thought. I don't remember which. And I was like, almost as if I thought like, oh, like so and so thought this. But then I had a pause, and this is the thing, is I was very dissociated actually, I think. And not I think, I know. I was very dissociated. So when you're very dissociated, it gets very hard to, you're not as present with what's happening inside of you. And, it's very difficult to sort of sort out what's what in your own head. And I had a moment that I was like, wait a minute. They would never say something like that. I've never even heard them say anything like that. Why would I think that? Like, I just had that moment of clarity. And this was around the time that I was in a new space. The school year had ended, so I was a little bit more relaxed and everything. And this all led into my theory of arousal and consolidation and everything. I was like, wait a minute, they would never even like, that has nothing to do with them. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. I was like, this has been my brain covering stuff up this whole time. I was like, this is my trauma again. And after that, like things changed a lot for me in terms of how I processed my head, how I understood my head. I had fragments of stuff coming up after that that were really distressing and stuff like that. And I just never like I didn't want to talk to people about this because I was really worried that people were going to try to tell me that I was lying about my trauma. And I didn't want that. I was really scared and nervous about that. And um, I mean, that's not even a completely invalid thought because I read the literature sometimes, and a lot of it is kind of doing very similar stuff. And I think that's what's bothersome about people not really knowing enough about dissociative disorders, believing dissociative disorders. And that's why I went into this. There's not enough dissociation science on how dissociation works that I, who am struggling so deeply with this, can't go into like, I can't even go into, I feel like I can't talk to my own therapist or my own, psychiatrist about this because I'm worried that they won't understand me and they won't believe me. And that's the problem with the stigma and with the lack of science is that I was like, I have to figure this out by myself. You see, I'm still doing it, right? That's what I did the next few years. I was like, I have to keep observing. I have to keep understanding. I have to figure this out by myself because nobody else is going to understand. Nobody else is going to believe me. It was a very intense and painful mentality for me to be in. It took a lot of like, it was hard, like really hard work. And I did have other things that did honestly lean into more, like this wasn't often, but like I did have one moment when I think something actually triggered me because I had like feelings from that traumatic experience coming up from one element of it. And I started to feel like everybody was talking about me or like everybody was like thinking stuff about me. And then I looked at something all of a sudden and it was like that thing was like a sign of, I don't even remember what it was a sign of. You see, I was so dissociated, I can't even remember what I thought it was a sign of. But I was in such an intense headspace. And that's why I'm very interested in self disorders, in like trauma induced psychosis, etc. I'm very interested in those like kinds of really serious mental health disorders that coincide with trauma because I had such a complex experience and I was like, there's a lot to sort out here. I've also heard that now people are saying that disorders like schizophrenia or like, symptoms like psychosis are also dissociative. People think that it's very coincided or like very aligned with dissociation, and I'm very interested to read about that. But I was having a very complex time for a while there. And then after that, I was very like afraid of my own brain and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want people to see me as crazy. I didn't want people to overwrite my experience so that I couldn't get the care that I needed for the trauma that I had. I didn't want people to stop like to be afraid of me or think that I'm weird. I was having a very complex time and I didn't want like another thing added. And so I just dealt with it by myself and it's hard. I think like obviously looking back, I had a great therapist. I should have just like talked about it more. I think I also didn't there's so much stigma around like psychosis and stuff. I didn't want anybody to see me as psychotic. And I had honestly like I think I did have a deep down feeling that there was more to the story and obviously that's why I'm here doing this research, but uh yeah, it was just like, it was very scary and very discombobulating and I felt like I had to go through all that alone. And you don't have to go through it alone. That's actually very normal. And as someone who's now studying dissociative symptoms, I never felt like I was hallucinating. Well, like I didn't hear external voices. Like I didn't think that somebody was actually talking outside. I didn't hallucinate stuff. Something that a lot of people don't know exists is called it's something called Schneiderian symptoms. A lot of people who struggle with dissociative disorders actually feel they hear internal voices. So that's what I'm saying. It's actually pretty complex. A lot of people go a very long time getting misdiagnosed for things that actually should be a dissociative disorder. But again, a lot of people just aren't well informed enough, even within psychology, on dissociative disorders, or don't believe in them, believe that they are social suggestibility and all these different things that I think it's just not correct, and that's why I'm here again. But just a lot of people don't really have like the expertise on dissociative disorders, and that actually is a thing if you're struggling with this. I never heard voices that came from outside the outside world. I didn't think people were like, see shadow people or anything like that. I just felt like my thoughts were like almost like I had chatter, like group chatter going on in my head all the time, and they didn't feel like another sense of self or anything. They just felt like almost like my friends and stuff were like talking to me on the inside. I felt very embarrassed about that. Like I was like, this is so like I didn't like it. Okay. And you can see I'm a very intelligent person, very self-aware. A lot of people with mental illness are. I had the self-awareness to know like this is not going, there's something not right here. And like I really don't want to tell this to my therapist. And I have actually within academic articles seen that a lot of people with dissociative disorders, like they are aware enough of the fact that like there's something not right happening and they are very nervous to tell I'm gonna actually link, this is like the best paper on dissociative disorders I read. I love it. I'm gonna link it below, but a lot of people with dissociative disorders don't want to tell their therapist, okay? And it's very complex. And this is the thing, is that I think that a lot of times like the conversation goes towards like people with mental health like struggles, like, oh yeah, like we should stigmatize it less and people should talk about it more. But I think we should also like sometimes validate the kinds of anxieties that people with mental health have, because honestly, if you read some of the stuff that people have written about dissociative disorders, calling them fake, you can see even in the paper that I linked below, somebody in the paper, it's a paper on clinician responses to dissociative disorders. They actually, like one of the therapists actually admitted that he thought that dissociative identity disorder, which is mostly what they were discussing in the paper, was a disorder of social suggestibility until he saw somebody having an alter switch in front of him in therapy. And what they were saying is that a lot of people go into therapy to like struggling with dissociative identity disorder, specifically was in this paper, and they start to try to like the therapists don't have the frameworks that they need, and it ends up being really mutually harmful to both people, and people don't make much progress. And then they saw that in people who actually did have that training, they had like fared better, like by a lot, like they had a much easier time. These sort of being my early career thoughts, I haven't had the chance to like write about this or anything. This is something I really want to write about and feel strongly about, is that I think that we should also validate that anxiety within people with mental health, within people with mental health struggles, that like there is stigma to work through within psychiatry, psychology itself. And it's not like, it's kind of valid to be afraid to go into therapy and have somebody rewrite your experience for you. I mentioned it in another video that I had a friend who, I have two anecdotes now. I learned another one that I had a friend who went into therapy, and I'm going to bring this up because I think it's important too. She was a Black woman and he was a white man, okay? And she went in to talk about her sexual abuse that she had dealt with, and he kept trying to pivot it to make it all about the fact that she needed to forgive her emotionally abusive father who abandoned them in childhood and who was always disrespectful to her when she called. And he tried to make everything about that, and like, oh, like all this anger she was feeling towards men was really actually about her father. And it's very invalidating to come in with like a sexual trauma or an abuse and feel like somebody's like, I think that it's not the right approach to be treating people like clients like they don't like, not honoring, I think, their intelligence and not honoring their intuition about themselves when they come in to therapy or into your research lab or anything, and rewriting the experience that they're having. 'Cause sometimes I look at these people who look at like dissociative like have written these sorts of papers on why they think dissociative disorders are fake, and I'm like, are you listening? What are you like? I don't know. It just kind of like shocks me as somebody who dealt with all of that. And I had another survivor I spoke to recently, tell me that she went in to talk about her sexual abuse that she dealt with as a child. And her therapist kept telling her, like, are you sure? Because you didn't say that last session. Are you sure? Because you didn't say that last session. And just kind of trying to always kind of I don't know what she was trying to imply, but like she said it got very triggering for her and difficult and she had to leave and she just hasn't really been back to therapy the way that she's wanted to. And there's such a power dynamic. I think like there's such a power dynamic that clinicians and researchers have above people with mental health struggles in with which I think should be disrupted and I think should be re- rethought because it's crazy to come in with an issue and feel like somebody's going to rewrite your whole experience for you and superimpose another idea and another everything onto your story. And I think that that's the thing, is that that's part of therapy to a certain degree, because people, you're there for somebody to help you cognitively rewrite and re-understand yourself, but at the same time it's like, but that shouldn't remove the sort of agency and voice that people with mental health have within the space for people to completely be like, oh, that's just fake, or like, your feelings actually, like, oh, you're saying that you're mad at men because of your sexual trauma, it's actually because of your dad, and like all this stuff that's like, I think that people, it's I always find it so interesting, and I've said this in other videos, how I feel like people who dealt with sexual abuse or sexual trauma always get the short end of the stick in therapy. I don't know if that's partly like a gendered issue, and I don't think that it is, because there's also so many men have dealt with sexual abuse. This is the thing, is I've never actually spoken to, because I think maybe people don't speak out about it as much if they're men, because stigma and everything. I've never person to person spoken to a man who's struggled with sexual abuse to know if that's the case for them, but I've definitely, a lot of women that I've spoken to who have struggled with this have spoken, like, have had that experience in therapy, and I didn't, thank God, because I had a great therapist. Cannot emphasize that enough. She was really good. But I just feel like you really hear that story a lot, and I think it's really troubling, and it makes sense for people to not want to come in and talk about their more severe mental health symptoms if they feel like people aren't gonna understand them, aren't gonna listen to them, or gonna just like, oh, like I'm not gonna take time to get into the nitty-gritty and the details, and I'm just gonna right away write this off as some kind of really immediate threat. Now you need to go into inpatient care and stuff, which is really complicated. But these are the kinds of complaints that I think I hear from people struggling with mental illness, and it makes it so hard to speak about your more serious mental health symptoms even with people that are meant to be trained professionals. It's like, okay, but how are you going to react to this? I can never know. I have absolutely no idea like where this is going to take us, and it's very difficult. So even having a great therapist, I was very nervous for so many reasons, particularly being a survivor, particularly just having that are you sure you're right? Are you sure you're telling the truth? Energy from society, from just from general like environment, to I felt worried talking about things that were trauma symptoms in therapy, because I was worried that people would overwrite my trauma. Even people in my life, like I didn't want to tell them, because it's like, oh, you say you're just crazy. So like that was all false, right? You're just a crazy person. So we can't trust what you say. And that's the other that's the other issue. It's like, just because people are like, it's not crazy. And I think that the minute that you talk about more serious mental health issues, people totally overwrite your whole identity into like this archetype of craziness, and like nothing that you can say can be trusted anymore. And I spoke in a video before, like this one right here, about how about a year or so later, I was writing a bunch of stuff on my brain. I was observing my brain a lot and my body and like what's happening here. And I actually wrote some stuff that was so spot on that I even read it in neuroscience books later. But I thought that everything that I was doing was crazy. I had really internalized that, like, this intense sort of worry about my own mind. And this is the thing, is that just because you struggle with difficulty understanding or unpacking like one element of you doesn't mean that you aren't really, really accurate and really good at seeing other things. This is one thing, is that like I actually am a very intuitive person. It's just that like back then I was really having trouble deciphering what was intuition and what was my trauma symptoms. Okay, because I actually am like genuinely, like, I have good intuition as a whole. Okay, for example, going down this path of like, this seemed really crazy on the surface. Like, are you sure you're going to be a scientist? Like, is this all some kind of psychosis that you think you're smart enough to be a scientist, right? And it's like, no, I actually perceived myself well, perceived the issue well, perceived that this needed to be written, and saw how to do it and did it all by myself, right? So I'm not like, I'm still a smart person, I'm still perceptive, and I actually do have pretty good intuition. It's just that I was struggling on that front with that issue of like, oh, everything is intuitive and I'm so like, I'm a mind reader. And it's like, that's not true. Doesn't mean that I couldn't be spot on. Sometimes like the intrusive thoughts where I was like, I think this person is thinking this, like 1 second later they'd say it. Okay, so sometimes I'm like, it was just really hard to decipher. And that's the thing. It's like, just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean that everything that you think and everything you feel is wrong and that you're stupid and crazy and like nothing, that you can't trust anything about yourself. It was a big journey for me in learning how to trust myself again and learning how to trust which like my own brain and which signals are coming out of like my brain and like what's right and what's wrong. People without mental health struggles also struggle with that. A lot of people are like, I'm on to you, like I think you're doing this, like I think you're cheating on me, and it's like, bro, no they're not, or like, you know, stuff like that, where it's like, it's not always like, a lot of people, everybody on earth like makes errors sometimes, and like, you know, I think I also struggled with like, I have to be cognitively perfect after this. I cannot ever slip up or make a mistake, and I can never lead myself down a wrong, like a correct, like a wrong path. Like I was really frustrated by my errors, and it's like, it's a balance because everybody also makes mistakes sometimes, and it's just about how disruptive is that to your normal life. But yeah, I was just thinking about that today and like wanted to talk about it. I never ever wanted to talk to anybody about this. Like I was like, I don't want to tell people that I thought that I was reading minds low key and that I had like everybody in my life in my head like discussing the world. Like that was a no. I was like, I don't, even back then I was like, let's not ever tell anybody this. This is really weird and disturbing. But I think I've just come to a place where I'm like, okay, that's fine. And like you see, I'm a normal girl. Like I'm pretty smart. I like, you know, I like to watch TV and go to cute little markets and have fun and make my little YouTube videos, and I study, and like, you know, I'm just a normal human being. I'm not like, you know, I think every like we always want to associate mental illness with like, you are incredibly antisocial and creepy and like you are just like, you know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm just a normal girl. Even back then, like you see those videos of me. I was struggling with all this horribly back then because I was in the middle of an invest like a Title IX trial. That was actually soon after, and my brain was wrecked. Actually, that was so re-traumatizing that it got really hard again. Like I was really struggling again to decipher my head, and I had like almost like a relapse of that at that time, and it was really hard. So you see that girl, she was dealing with that exact same stuff back then, like, and you see I looked pretty normal. I like to dress cute. I was like in my little purple dress and everything, like, and I was struggling with that the whole way through. Genuinely. Genuinely the whole way through. I was struggling with that exact thing. At the party, I was struggling with the exact thing. Like it's hard. It's not, it doesn't make you a weird person or creepy person or bad person. Like you're just a person. And especially like for people who have been through trauma, trauma is so freaking hard. It's so hard. More than it's so much more than like what we we see on the surface, and it's not just like shell shock, you know, it's also a lot of difficult things like psychosis and all these different things that can happen because of trauma. People can develop all sorts of stuff about trauma. I've seen people talking about postpartum stuff, and I was really interested. There's like postpartum depression, postpartum OCD, postpartum psychosis, right? There's post trauma like everything, tbh. Trauma is just a crazy, because it's like setting off a nuclear bomb in your head and you're like, okay, now I have to be normal. It's like, bro, there's like a whole explosion going on in here. Like everything is thrown off to the side, stuff is like melting, and like I don't know, there's a lot going on here, and it's like it's really hard to bounce back after that. It's like, you know, you're not bad or weak or anything, it's just like it really is that tough. And I think honestly, even chemically, it's really kind of like like it's like, bro, chemicals are going off like crazy chemicals, and you're just like, oh my god, and now your brain is chemically altered and everything. So it's just tough. But I just wanted to talk about that. I actually might leave this as like a little short standalone, but I'm going to show you what I'm working on next in my project, because I've been wanting to do this next part kind of like in silence watching TV. I haven't really been in the mood to like talk through this piece that much, because I just want to cover a lot of ground quick. So I'm going to show you what ground we're covering in the next week or two. And then soon I'm going to have been waiting for my money to hit my account. And once my money hits my account, I'm gonna pay for Claude Code, and that'll be like a whole new era of this project. So I'm kind of closing out an era right now that I might not show that much. Okay, the last thing I was gonna say also is I was really scared to talk about my mental health struggles because I didn't want anybody to take me away from my world. I was like, I like school, like I don't want to go away. I don't want people to like, I don't know. I was like, I think I was really honestly back then really nervous to, I think part of the reason that I felt so protective over that inner reality is I was like, I don't think that I was psychologically or subconsciously ready to deal with how tough that whole entire situation was and just like how traumatic it was. And I was like, back then I would kind of like I saw it as like, your brain's kind of giving you something that's easier to cope with, and like turning all of this negative and like angry and like really violent sexual stuff in your head from being a survivor into something that feels easier, and it feels like people who love you, and it feels like, a bit lighter. Because I was like, that's the other thing. I was like, don't think I was ready to tell my therapist because I was like, I don't think I'm ready to cope with this trauma to the degree that I should be. And that's a really tough position to be in. I was like, I don't want to. I'm always worried. I think now, like, I've just gotten to the point that I don't feel that way so much anymore, and I've been really like excited to go to therapy and everything once I have more of like a life situation for it. But I was like, I was always, for example, really nervous to get on anxiety medication and stuff because I was like, I felt it in my body, and that's why I'm doing this project. Okay, that's like literally my theory. I felt it in my body. I was like, if I relax, if I talk about it, and if I'm vulnerable about it, like everything is going to come up from underneath. And I just feel like that's going to make my life explode if I don't hold it all in and deal with it in the way that I can. And I didn't always verbalize that, but I felt that, I think, subconsciously. And that's something that I was like, this is easier to cope with, actually. Being this mentally ill is easier to cope with than talking about it to a therapist and seeing my entire life crumble again. And I think it's obviously dissociation stuff is very protective, and the way that our brains deal with life are very protective as well. And yeah, I don't know. It's it's tough, man, but like sometimes I look back and I really wish that I had been braver and just spoken about it because I was struggling a lot, and I think the worst part was the shame, that I felt a lot of shamefulness and I didn't get the support that I needed. And sometimes I'm like, man, if I could go back in time, I would tell myself I'm like my own mentally ill older sister vibe where it's like, girl, it's okay, like it's not embarrassing. It's really not, and we stigmatize it and we shame it so much, and it's like it's really not that, like, I'm not embarrassed of it, but I was really embarrassed of it back then. And I'm like, I wish I could tell myself from back then, like, it's really not embarrassing. This is the things that we teach, we treat mental health like it's a personal failure, and it's not. That's like being like, oh, you broke your foot. That's so embarrassing, bro. What? You broke your foot? Ew, I'm not gonna hang out with you because you have a broken foot. And like someone's like, oh man, I'm not gonna get help because my foot's broken. And it's like, you need to fix the broken foot. And we don't treat mental health like that. We treat it like it's like a whole nother kind of personality thing, or it's like it's really not. It's the same thing as like, think this is the thing that really gets me is like when people are like actively making sort of like shaming or whatever about, I don't know, even like psychosis or stuff. I'm like, imagine someone was like making fun of cancer or telling cancer patients they shouldn't get support for their disorder, or people were like, it's so embarrassing to have cancer, right? It's like, we'd be like, that's so disgusting, and like never say that again, right? Like that's people struggling with like one of the worst things you can deal with, where it's like people literally go homeless, people literally end their lives because of stuff like schizophrenia, dissociative disorders. Like we treat it as like a personality trait where it's like it's a real sickness, and people deserve care. People deserve to be like loved and have their loved ones be around them and like taking care of them the way that they would for another mental illness. And like I really grieved back then because I was like, I'm so sick. And nobody, I was like, I can't get people to treat me like a sick person or like a sick young person. Like I was like I felt afraid. And really what I needed was to be treated just like anybody else who was sick, right? And that was like a big grief as I moved through that experience. And like now I don't feel that same grief as much anymore, but I think back then I was like, man, like I'm stuck in bed. I feel really debilitated. Is that the word? I was like, I just wish that somebody would treat me like a sick child, because like that's how I feel right now, right? And it's like nobody, I think people don't often approach people's mental health like the sickness that it is, or like not sickness as in like sickness like ill, or like, you know, like a virus, but sickness like you're sick, you have a cold or something. And it's like it's really sad for people with mental health, because I think we go through so much alone, and we don't want to talk about what we're dealing with because we're so scared, and it's like we're literally sick and are in need of support. And it's like that sucks so bad. But anyways, basically the next thing I've been trying to do, you can see this week, I was working on Python, and I was also trying to figure out my time at Portia. If anybody knows, like, I have 2 cows now, and I don't know what to do with the cows, TBH. I don't like, this is the thing that's getting me, is like I have to build an entire shed or a stable. I'm like, you're joking. Like I have to spend money on that. And it was, if you know my time at Portia, it was McDonald who gave it to me for finishing a freaking quest. And I was like, bro, you gave me a homework assignment. You didn't give me a present. I don't want this. So I couldn't figure out how to sell it. I was looking on Reddit and everything. I was like, I don't know what to do with these freaking cows. But now I have to do a whole nother thing when I've been, my time at Portia has been a struggle recently. It's been a real struggle. I'm trying to, it's like everything is piling up so bad. It's so stressful. I have to basically spar these freaking people, like these, like the policemen essentially of the city, so that they can see if I can go inside the hazardous, what's it called, like the hazardous wasteland, to get more stuff. Or I'm like, I didn't even want to go there in the first place, first of all. Now y'all are making me fight you, and I didn't even want to do that. And Huss and Tuss are still trying to freaking attack me, and they're just sitting in the cave waiting. This is the thing that actually kind of makes me laugh, is that they've been just sitting and waiting in this cave for me for like two weeks equivalent. And I've just been like, I'm gonna get killed if I go in there. So it's been a really stressful time. I've been practicing sparring. And then on top of everything, he gave me cows. And I was like, I have so much on my plate. You don't understand. Like, you need to take these cows back. But anyways, that's my other drama in my life right now. But yeah, so here we have so much stress. Recurrent excitation is the next thing. I've just been like doing some more reading, and I tried to look into papers, but I wasn't right away finding a good paper. But I think I am going to try to go back to the papers. I just needed to have like another explanation again. Like I knew how it worked theoretically, but I've been a little bit confused as to how this is meant to work in the network. So I've just been like kind of going back to that and trying to get like a really good understanding before I jump into the Hopfield network stuff in like 2 weeks. And then the other thing is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to keep reading about recurrent excitation, and I want to try to figure out how this is going to work in my Hopfield network. And the other thing is that I've been playing around with this Hopfield network that I found online. Like it was pre-built, and it's been a lengthy process the last few weeks of me, honestly, more like, yeah, like in the last week or two. I've been going through every single piece and trying to understand everything. I actually finished Python, like I said in the video that I actually now think is going to come up after this one. But basically, yeah, I've just been trying to like understand each part, and then I had to understand like, okay, this is like a loop, this is like, okay. So I finally feel like I understand each piece of this, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do some practice sessions that have nothing to do with recurrent excitation. And I'm just going to ask, like, I'm just going to play around with what does it look like when you change the weights on a Hopfield network? Like, what does that look like? What happens? That's what I'm really curious about. So I will be doing that. I don't think it's going to be that exciting to like put it into a whole video, but hopefully next video I'll have like some more to sort of describe about that. We'll see. And yeah, that's basically it. I have other questions, but that'll probably be more complex and maybe more for like my supervisor. Like this one, I could ask ChatGPT this, but like, how do I do like, how many neurons do I put in there? Just stuff like that. I don't know. But that's what I'm basically going to be doing this week. I've been a bit lazy now to make videos, TBH, so I'm just going to do that by myself. And I'll just do like a summary. But yeah, anyways, this was kind of just like a silly update. I don't know. Y'all just saw me looking cute at my senior like boat dinner thing and then talking about having a mental health illness, but mental illness. But I hope that was useful or interesting to somebody. And please comment below what you do with your cows in my time at Portia because I don't want to deal with these cows.